Mr. President,
The senator from New York.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And we've had a long discussion today on the amendment to the Surface Transportation Bill offered by my colleague and friend from Missouri, Senator Blunt. Now, I think the discussion has shown pretty clearly that the amendment by the gentleman from Missouri is both way beyond the scope of what most people envisioned and is extreme. It's way beyond the scope because it would cause deprival of health care, certain types of health care, to perhaps millions of Americans in areas that go way beyond contraception. Because all an employer would have to do is say that they have a moral objection to, say, providing vaccinations, and they wouldn't have to provide health care. Now, maybe the employees could go sue or go to court for 10 years and figure this out, but that's not what we want. So it would be a giant step backward in terms of health care. It's also a giant step backward in terms of depriving millions of American women of contraception. In a sense, this is a ban on contraception, at least for the millions of American women whose employer would say, I don't want to provide contraception. Some of those might be motivated by religious beliefs. Some might be motivated by simply saving money. And we'd never know except after long and costly litigation, again, that would deprive the employee of contraception for a very long time. I think if people listened in on this debate, they'd say that this was a debate occurring not in 2012, but maybe in 1912 or even 1812, because issues like a woman's right to contraception without the employer making a determination have long been decided by this country, and you've seen the statistics. The overwhelming majority of Americans of every faith believe that contraception should be available. So the debate has been pretty clear. And the other side, I think, is making a huge mistake, certainly substantively and in my judgment politically. So much so that today the leading presidential candidate on the Republican side, when asked whether he supported the Blunt Amendment, said no. He didn't think that Congress should be getting involved in contraception. Mr. Romney said we should not be doing this amendment, and he didn't support it unequivocally and clearly. Now, a few hours later, of course, his folks walked that back, probably because of pressure, political pressure. He's facing Republican primaries where this issue is debated seriously, even if the rest of America doesn't believe that it should be debated. But what it shows is when even a leading candidate of the other side who's seeking votes from the hard right has doubts about whether this is a good idea, that those doubts are real, the other side should make a retreat. Our Republican colleagues should not make the same mistake they made on payroll tax deduction by appealing to an extreme group. They should back off this amendment, they should vote with us, and we should move on and debate the highway bill and put millions of Americans to work and update our infrastructure. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Majority Leader.
As unanimous consent, the call to quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
I now ask permission by unanimous consent to move to a period of morning business. Senators allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
I ask consent the Senate proceed to S-Res 382.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 382, designating March 2nd, 2012 as Read Across America Day.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
As unanimous consent, the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table, there be no intervening action or debate. Any statements related to this matter be placed on the record as if read.
Without objection.
As unanimous consent, we now proceed to S-Res 383.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 383, designating February 29th, 2012 as Rare Disease Day.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table, there be no intervening action or debate, and any statements related to this matter be placed on the record as if read.
Without objection.
Mr. President, before I start what we refer to as the closing script here, I want the record to be spread. We have tried all day to come up with an agreement to move forward on this legislation, and we've been unsuccessful. This is a piece of legislation that is as bipartisan as is humanly possible. We have one of the most progressive members of the Senate, Senator Boxer, and one of the most conservative members of the Senate, Jim Inhofe, who are co-sponsoring this legislation. It's a piece of legislation to continue our highway program, our surface transportation program. It's so needed. I had yesterday the Director of the Department of Transportation from the state of Nevada, Susan Martinovich. I'm confident most senators here have someone from their state, because there's a conference back here for these people. It will bring construction in Nevada to a standstill on our highways, our bridges, some of our mass transit programs. But we can't even get on the bill. I've agreed to do these unrelated amendments. My caucus agreed we'll do these. We don't want to. They're not productive. They're message amendments. They're not germane. They're not relevant. But we'll do those. A limited number of these bad amendments. There's been over 100 of them filed. I mean, I am with a loss of words of what the Republicans expect me to do. Stand around for another week and look at each other? The amendment we're going to vote on tomorrow, Mr. President, we started moving this bill on February 7th. This piece of legislation out of nowhere on a transportation bill dealing with contraception. We've agreed to have votes on it. They won't let us have votes on it. So yesterday, I had to bring up a Republican amendment that they didn't even bother to file. They just wanted to talk about it and hold press conferences on this issue. So unless something changes, I'm going to have to file cloture on this bill. And we're going to have to find out if the Republicans really want to destroy all across 50 states. The presiding officer of the state of Oregon. The state of Oregon is just like Nevada. Employment's not been good. To have another hit to our economy by not doing the highway construction, especially as the weather's getting better, there's a lot can go on. So I have no alternative but to file cloture to stop a filibuster. It's one of these roving filibusters that there's just all these phantom people that won't let us move forward on this legislation. This has been going on for a long time. And I am almost embarrassed to be saying this in front of the presiding officer. I say that because the presiding officer, along with the junior senator from New Mexico, thought that maybe we should change how this place operates at the beginning of the year. But a number of us, in good conscience, felt that the few changes we've made would be sufficient to establish a better working order here. It hasn't been better. It hasn't been better. In fact, I'm sorry to say it's worse. So we're going to unless something happens, we'll have a vote tomorrow. Can you imagine I created a vote because they wouldn't allow us to have a vote? So I don't see what choice I have. So I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, the Senate adjourn until Thursday, March 1st at 9:30 a.m. Following the prayer and the pledge, adjournment proceedings be approved today. The morning hour be deemed expired. The time for 2 leaders be reserved for use later in the day. The following any leader remarks, the Senate resume consideration of S. 1813, the Surface Transportation Bill, with the time until 11 a.m. equally divided and controlled between the 2 leaders of the designees. At 11 a.m., the Senate proceed to vote in relation to the Blunt Amendment, number 1520, and all provisions under the previous order remain in effect. I'm going to say now, I will ask consent in the morning, Mr. President, that I want to have the full hour and a half to have this matter debated. We're going to come in tomorrow at 9:30, so it'll be an hour and a half. I want to make sure we have that full time. And so I'm going to ask consent that the statements of Senator McConnell and me not count against the hour and a half, but I'll do that tomorrow. We don't have to worry about that tonight. So I'd ask the chair to approve my consent request.
Without objection, so ordered.
So, Mr. President, 11 a.m., the Senate will proceed to vote in relation to the Blunt Amendment, number 1520, on contraception and health care. Tomorrow, we'll continue to work on a path forward on the transportation bill, as I've outlined previously. No further business come before the Senate. I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
Senate stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow.